Welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Ultimate 180 podcast. If you've ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, or trapped in your own life and wish you were able to have a complete life makeover, well, then you're in the perfect place to learn how to pull an Ultimate 180 and change your life beyond all expectations. I'm your host, Christina Walker, and today I brought back with me the always popular Dr. Stephen Cohen for the second part of our discussion on how to thrive on change. And we started that on episode 17. And on that episode, we focused on the importance of planning for change and how to do that, really, to minimize stress for you and all the people around you. So today we're going to move into how to maintain a positive mindset when implementing change through all its obstacles and challenges, and maybe even have a lot of fun all along the way. But before we dive in, I want to ask you just a quick favor. If this episode at all sparks something inside you, whether it's hope, inspiration, or even a little nudge to think differently, if you'll just take a split second to hit that follow button on your podcast app, because it not only helps you stay connected to more life-changing insights, but you are also helping this podcast reach more people who may need a little help changing their lives too. And if there's something that really speaks to you, if you experience an aha moment, screenshot this episode, post and tag me on social with your biggest giveaway, and because I'd love to really hear about it. And you never know, you just might be the next featured Ultimate 180 story. So let's get started as we navigate change together, 1 degree at a time. Let's do this. Welcome, Dr. Cohen. Thank you so much for coming back and joining me for part 2.
Well, it's great to see you again, Christina. You hear people when they're interviewed saying, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I have to tell you that the first 2 times that you and I got to meet were 2 of the most enjoyable things I've done in my career as far as interviews and lectures. And I'm really excited about getting this third opportunity to do so with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It means so much to me. And if anyone doesn't know this man, you must go back at least to episode 17, the beginning of this topic on thriving for change, because this man is quite spectacular. And coming from him, he has been interviewed so many times on major publications and around the world on the radio. And to have that come from you is I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
That's well deserved.
Thank you. So I want to recap real quick. Last time we focused on how to minimize stress when we are going through a major change. And we gave some insight into how to properly plan and communicate. And by doing this, it lowers the stress for everybody involved. And today, since this is part 2, I thought it would be good to focus on the journey of implementing the change and how we can, dare I say, maybe have some fun in the process and, through all the challenges and obstacles that you go along the way. So I think I almost said readers. I don't think anybody's reading this, but you never know. I think all the listeners would really appreciate that because we gave them a really good jumping off point, and it's where the implementation happens that I think that's where people really start to stumble because everything gets real, right? You can plan, you can get everybody on board, but when you start implementing, that's when all the things need to happen. And I thought you would be the perfect person to help me talk about that today.
Well, thank you. And there's the old saying, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So I think the first discussion was really critical. And I believe the analogy I gave you the last time was that if you think of it, if you see a duck on a pond, it looks like they're smoothly going, but the feet are going crazy under the surface. And
right.
The under the surface stuff that happens in change is all the planning that goes into it before you initiate the implementation.
Yeah, and then I cannot stress how much the planning really is so important to how the implementation is going to go, right? So if you didn't plan, go back to that step because the planning, even if it takes a little bit longer, I think people also think, I don't want to take the time because then the end result is just going to take longer to get there. But I
Yeah.
think what they don't realize, and I'll let you speak to that, I think what they don't realize is if you don't plan, it can take you twice as long or more because you haven't planned, right?
That was the exact point I was going to make, is that you hear so many times, how do people have time to redo something, but not enough time to do it right the first time? And in the planning, you're more likely, you increase the chance you're going to get it right the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I like the way you say that. But you're right. It's that's interesting that people don't they somehow have the time to do something over and over and over, but they don't have time to plan. So I
Mhm.
think maybe if they can just start out with the right mindset of, all right, I'm going to try it this time. I'm going to put up the
Mhm.
upfront work involved. I feel like that with any project. I'm kind of a crafter. And I remember I used to just dive in and it didn't matter what it was I was doing, where it was sewing. And it's really important when you make clothing, you have to make sure the plans are right, right? The patterns. And I used to just jump in and sew. And I didn't realize part of the process is you have to actually iron the fabric before or it's going to come out wonky, right?
What a
And so
concept.
something as simple as I mean, not that
Mhm.
sewing's simple, but something as simple as that, you have to plan. So if you're planning on a major life change, especially some of the things that you talked about last time in your own office, I mean, the planning is crucial.
I found that for me, it's if I'm putting together furniture or something and it comes with instructions, and you start with step one, but the step before step one is identifying all the pieces.
Oh,
And I can't
yeah.
tell how many times I've wound up doing it. I think, well, those are the pieces. I don't need to worry about that part. And then once I get started, I realize I connected the wrong piece, the wrong piece. I have to backtrack. So you're right. Take the time to
Guilty.
prepare. Yeah.
Guilty. Or you get through that, halfway through the project, but because you didn't look at all the, count all of the screws and which
Hmm.
kind of screws, that there's something missing. And then
Guilty.
like you could have, right? Instead you would have waited to start that project till you got the other screw.
Yes.
Um, so I kind of want to start out with a story, because that always helps people
Hmm.
understand and relate, especially to you because you have such good experience. If you tell me about a time where you were experiencing and organizing a major change in your office or even in your private life, and you actually helped others find joy in the journey.
Yeah, because that's the unanticipated part. And, it's a really, I see two aspects to that issue. And one I could answer with, before I give the example that you're asking for, in a single word, and that's empowerment. That when you're looking at your goal being to find joy and to find collaboration and all, the empowerment is such a key aspect to it, because if you have a team of people that you need along with you to create that plan and to reach that desired change, if people feel like stakeholders, they feel more of a sense of ownership in the results, and they're more likely to be more collegial, more collaborative, more effort through that process. Look at it, they say success begets success. So
Yes.
that works with it. But the interesting thing, one thing I often say is that hard work does not guarantee success, but
Thank you.
success success rarely comes without hard work. And I can give you a sports analogy. When we talk about success and about joy and whatnot, is that if you ever listen to an athlete on a team who's interviewed after a championship, almost invariably they talk about unity and team chemistry. And the question is, did the unity and chemistry create the winning, or did the winning create the chemistry and the unity? Because you rarely hear an athlete on a losing team talk about, well, in spite of our record, we had great chemistry. And quite the contrary, they usually talk about things like, well, we didn't gel as a team.
Right.
So that it often becomes self-fulfilling, and it also winds up being in both a positive and potentially a negative way. But there's nothing like success to be able to create joy and enthusiasm going forward. And the key is, how do you go about doing that? I'll give you an example that we did in our office a few years ago. We use electronic health records like most medical practices, and we're at a point where we thought we might need to consider an alternative. There are many programs that are available, but in doing so, we face the challenge, say with our staff, our team, is, well, we've always done it that way. And that winds
Yes.
up being a formula for paralysis. If that were the case, we always did it that way, we'd still be listening to music on a cassette, or God forbid, an 8-track, and
No.
we'd be watching movies on VHS. So
True.
that we do that. So we have to figure out that if we're going to make change, how do we get people to embrace it, and how do we create that sense of ownership? So getting to the example leading to that joy, we decided when we were looking at changing our electronic health records, that we would first go to the stakeholders, our staff, our team, and say, what do you like about our current program? What works, and what do you find is effective? What things don't you like? And if you had a wish list of what a platform would be able to provide, what would those things be? So we took all that information and then went about looking at what programs were out there. My partner wound up finding one that remarkably addressed a vast majority of the things we felt and that our staff felt, so that we were able to then come back to them, and we talked about, hey, we found something, and we reflected back to the very issues they brought up. Because
Oh,
then,
good.
yes, we said, you mentioned these things. Here are some of the priorities you set up. Look how this program may address those things. So what gives a sense of enthusiasm and pride than to say, I'm part of the solution? And then you go about the process. So we would refer back to those comments. But going back to the empowerment issue, my business partner and I, and her name is Dr. Goldberg. She's been my patient since she was 8 years old, and she's soon expecting her second child, and makes me feel really, really old. But she and I certainly had the ability to have the final say, but we recognize the value of in the decisions and the implementation of keeping everyone involved and their ideas involved, and trying to incorporate a new plan while we were still very busy seeing patients. So as an executive or an owner, you could lead by edict and certainly have the right to do that. You're in
Sure.
charge. I prefer to lead by empowerment and inclusion.
You know what I love about, I love that, first of all. I absolutely love that because I mean, I feel personally that's just the best way to lead. It really brings joy to people in general when they feel empowered. And I liked what you said about you said first you brought back kind of their pain points and then how this solution solved. And to me, joy is a feeling, right? Joy, excitement, and when people feel empowered, and to really bring out the joy in the process, I think is part of it is remembering, hey, remember the pain of
Mhm.
this, right? This is what you said you didn't like. And so people are like, oh, they get that feeling inside like, oh yeah, that's right. I don't like that part. And then when you make the leap of this solves it, I feel like that is a key, is an interesting key to keep them along the way thinking, and you can use that along the way. Remember, and here we go, right? Remember, here we go. And that way they can keep going from the pain over to the joy of like, oh yeah, like I helped come up with that. And this is going to be so much easier. This is going to be so exciting. And it's a feeling versus a rote, this is the step by step, what we
Mhm.
have to do, right?
Well, it's interesting. I was caught by the way you phrased it, because you use the term joy. Um, may sound like nuance, but happiness is a state of mind. But joy usually comes from a result of something,
Yes.
something special. So the joy to me is that next level. You can be a happy person going into a project, but the joy comes from the work, the joy comes from the success, the joy comes from the results. And I think it's an
Right.
important
Joy is a
distinction.
state. Yeah, no,
Mhm.
joy is absolutely a state. Happiness is an emotion and
Mhm.
it's in a moment, right? You can have many moments, but right, but joy is that satisfaction, that peace.
Satisfaction.
It's peace, right? A satisfaction, a peace about things where it does, everything results in, because happiness up and down, up and down. And if you chase, my philosophy is, you chase happiness, you're always going to lose, because happiness can't sustain, but joy can be sustainable.
Yeah,
The
because
state of joy.
completely agree. I think it's a really important distinction. And I love the thought, because it's such an unusual question to get about how do you bring about joy in the process? Because the way you described before, almost like an automaton, is the way we usually go about it. It's very methodical, it's very detailed, it's very step by step, but it can be fun, it can be exciting, it could be stimulating, it could be
Right.
enriching. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's sometimes what we miss, especially in an office scenario. But even, as an entrepreneur is there you get inundated with the step-by-step process of things. And I think people start to lose the fun of why did I even start this project? Right? Why am I even bothering anymore? Because it just seems like so much work. And I know you said hard work. I clinch when I hear hard work because I think your hard work, the way that you go about it, is not a bad thing. I think some people think and feel of hard work as like drudgery, but work is all of the actions, and they can be inspired, they can be energetic, they can be fun, they can be exciting actions. And that is the work. Like there's a lot of work to be done. And the distinction between that kind of hard work and the drudgery, I think that's kind of the key that I think we're here today, right? That's the key really, is making that work something that's inspiring so that at the end, like you can find the joy in your work.
No question. And the one saying I like is the how is it that the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Ah,
We shouldn't be afraid of hard work, and because anything worthwhile is worth working on, and anything that's there's a line from the movie A League of Their Own. Tom Hanks and Gina
oh
Davis
yeah.
had the women's baseball team during World War II. And at one point, Gina Davis says to Tom Hanks, but she's a little bit frustrated. She said, talking about baseball, and said, "But it's hard." And Tom Hanks' character said, "It's supposed to be hard. It's the hard that makes it great. If it wasn't hard,
Right.
anybody would be able to do it." So it's given a negative connotation of hard work, but I
It
see it
is.
as the roadmap to success and achievement and satisfaction and fulfillment.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and I do think that the word hard, and maybe we need to recoin the phrase somehow, really, because the word hard, I think people think, oh gosh, I don't want to do hard things.
Mhm.
And I used to have a phrase when I would work out or when I was doing something I didn't want to do because I knew I had to do it to get through the process. And I would stare at the mirror or wherever I was. I'm like, I can do hard things. I can do hard things. And it got me excited about getting through something new because it's the breakthrough, right? You can't break through to do fun and new things. It'll never be fun if you do the same thing over and over and over. So the only way to get past that is to do hard things. And so you'll hear me sometimes stop myself from saying hard, and I don't mean it in the way of, yeah, I mean, you have to do a lot of things and they're not easy, but that's how you grow.
Well, you think about simply what are the things we want to valuing? Do we value the things that are given to us, or do we value the things we achieve and that we earn? And
Right.
it's always, if you have a stake in the game, you're more likely to find satisfaction from it. Things that are just handed to us usually we don't value as much.
Right. Yeah, and it's not as fun.
Not
Right?
fun.
There was no journey to get there. There was no story. It's funny, I sometimes my kid says, "Hey, tell me one of your stories from your life." And I have the funniest stories, and a lot of them came from being in a place that wasn't necessarily also great. But it was the process of going through it and finding the fun in it that makes it a fun story to tell,
Yeah.
right? And it's why I have so many stories to tell, because if you don't do anything, you really don't have any fun stories. And it sure is
Mhm.
fun to look back at your life and be like, wow, well, you know what? I need to do more fun things. Maybe I'm not doing enough fun things because
Enough
I
fun
sure
things.
have done a lot of fun things.
Having gotten to know you, you are legitimately a fun person, and
Oh, thank
you
you.
do look at the world in a joyful way, and it's one of the things I admire about you.
Oh, thank you. I do. I don't even know if I told you I've written some children's books, and the name of the character is Joy. And
Really,
it's,
how ironic. Oh,
yeah, and
that's
it's
wonderful.
called, the series is called Joy and then an N and the World. And so because that inspires me, and that's a whole subject for another day.
Yeah, I'd love to
But
hear
it's
about that.
funny, that is my viewpoint of the world, and
Mhm.
I'm here to bring joy to the world. So
Yeah.
so I hope that I
If I could
do.
sing, I would do the song, but I'm going to spare you and everyone that might be listening by not doing that. Puberty took care of my singing voice. It was all over after that.
Well, that good thing that you got a great radio voice, because then that didn't go away. So let me see if my next question's even valid because we've gone so far into this amazingly. So what helps you, like you personally, actually, what helps you maintain your excitement so that you can help others? And because you really have, obviously, you and I know we affect all the people around us with our energy of whether it's joy or frustration or whatever. So because of that, we know that we affect the people around us. So when you're going through change or you're even in your day-to-day, obstacles, how do you maintain your joy and your excitement about what you're doing, the changes that you're doing, so that you can bring others into that process?
I think first and foremost is that I always try to keep my eye on the prize. What are we ultimately trying to reach? And that becomes critical. And also to expect those inevitable challenges and obstacles that'll come. Some of them will be red herrings that are distractions. Some of them may be valuable and unanticipated issues that actually are should be part of the process. So we can expect it. And when you look at it that way, there really aren't any failures because in things, when you hit an obstacle, you hit a roadblock, it gives the opportunity to learn from it. And when you learn from it, then you incorporate that learning into going forward, which then helps you to keep your eye on the prize. Um, I see it as a three-step process, if I might.
Yeah.
Step one is prepare for the obstacles, that you can learn from them. They can be discussed with the team and then incorporated. But another key element is to be time flexible, because sometimes when you hit an obstacle, the
Yeah.
answer isn't right in front of you. And like we
Mhm.
talked about before, about taking the time to prepare and that you can save time, and maybe you think, I don't have time to do the preparation, but you have time to redo it. But if you're time flexible and you hit that and you try to push through and push through, sometimes it just doesn't come. Taking a pause often gives an opportunity to then
Love
reflect back.
that.
Maybe the answer becomes a little more evident, or you get a chance to recharge a little bit. But that winds up being very helpful itself. And a third part of for my enthusiasm and reflecting off of other people and helping theirs is to be willing to take on the role, to whatever your personality is like, the role of a cheerleader, because as a cheerleader, you help to maintain that positive reinforcement motivates and maintains things. And it could be used then to overcome those challenges because you're staying very positive and prepare for the next challenge.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny that I think I even just did an episode on the power of the pause. Pause is it's such a valuable part of the process. And I think as a society, we want things to be done, 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 done. And we don't realize that in order for the people around you, yourself, even in health, it would be even your body to catch up to some of the changes to then be able to find the next way. There has to be a pause. There has to be a pause somewhere to integrate. And I always call it integration. There has to be an integration time because as you said, maybe there's an obstacle, and maybe it's because everything hasn't integrated yet to see the best possible next way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Well,
move too quickly, you're going to miss out on something spectacular, which is maybe why you're hitting a wall.
when I write something that's important, let's say if I'm writing a journal article, the key is I write it, come up with my ideas, do a draft of it, but I always take a pause and walk away from it for one reason. When you continue to read it straight through, you're reading it as the writer. When you take a break and
True.
come back to it, you're reading it as the reader. And I can't tell you how many times when I've done that, I look at it and think, that really didn't explain things that I want, or that's not clear, or I could have done better with that. So that pause changes your perspective.
It absolutely does. And I've also learned to read it out loud because then it's another sense that kicks in when you read it out loud and you hear it as an audience. And that also can change the way, like when you write, it can change the whole mentality of, oh, wait, that's not what I was trying to say at all. It's an interesting, and it's a very powerful part of the process is the pause. Um,
And again, people often feel they don't have time to take a pause because they got to forge ahead, not recognizing that pause actually may save them time by helping figure out what
Absolutely.
the next course should be.
That is a great point. So what would be maybe your top tip on how to stay focused When you are pulled in multiple directions during major changes, because you are maybe you're dealing with multiple obstacles and challenges all at the same time, how do you kind of, what's your top tip of staying focused on the eye on the prize?
That's a really interesting question. And I almost see it as a dichotomy because, first and foremost, as I said earlier, is keep your eye on the prize, is keep your eye on the objective. Where is our ultimate goal? To be able to separate those from things that may be extraneous distractions that don't get you there. And if I would offer an example, it would be like um, if I would decide I'm going to walk from point A to point B, one way of doing it is all I have to do is keep my eye on point B. And if I find I'm getting closer, I know I'm going the right way. I don't, if I spend time looking at my feet, then I run the risk that I'm going to look back up and suddenly I'm no closer to the point B, or I've lost sight of point B.
Right.
But the dichotomy is every now and then checking in with your feet, which is that sort of attention to detail, gives me an opportunity to see, might there be a better path? Is there an obstacle in my way? Maybe there's a hole in the ground that I don't want to step in. So there's a value in both, but the key is to remain focused on the goal, and to be able to, if you see incremental progress, that winds up being the harbinger. Am I going the right way? And to celebrate those, look at those little incremental goals, as long as I'm still moving toward the ultimate goal. So I would look at it and say, almost it's like what often we do in medicine, a triage process. Determine what things are, something may come up that's unanticipated, that pull, as you describe it, that could be really important, that requires incorporation. Some may be fit into a category that's interesting and it may be something to consider down the road. And the third would be ones that we just need to table entirely because they're not going to contribute to our progress. So I think the prioritization is to maintain focus and determine what's worthy, what versus what might just be distracting noise.
And it's just kind of coming back to that over and over and over through the process of,
Yeah.
all right, let's, we hit an obstacle. Here's a solution. Pause. What is our goal? Let's bring our focus back. Does that solve, is that really the best way to solve it? I like that. I like keep bringing it back, right? Bringing it back. But I also liked what you said about also checking in with your feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sometimes that path isn't necessarily the best path. So you do have to check both ways. But I like that.
Can I ask you a question, Christina?
Sure, absolutely.
The questions that are doing, which is what most of us face, is that you may be a change agent, but often you have partners or people that are important to reach that process. Your situation is kind of unique, particularly the transition to the ultimate 180, in that you're a team of one. So I'd be
Yes.
interested, is that, yeah, for me, there's the added responsibility and activity of herding the cats, keeping everyone incorporated, everyone engaged. But there were also particular changes when you don't have other people that potentially you can feed off of to keep you motivated, keep you focused. So how do you go about doing it when you implement change when it's a party of one?
That's a great question. And it's interesting because as a party of one, I never really look at myself as a party of one because I have lots of people that I use to support me, whether it's a virtual assistant, it's the podcast studio, my husband, right? There's a lot of people involved that I gain inspiration from or ask for help from. And it's very different being a solopreneur versus being in an office. I used to run large teams in a corporate environment. And so for me, I'm such a visual person. I really like to write down what my vision is. What's my vision for the end of this? What do I really want out of the process? And I think as a solopreneur, there's an attached
Solopreneur. I,
solopreneur. Don't
I
you love
love that
that?
term. I love that term.
I wish I came up with it, but it is,
Well, from my
I think
point of view,
it's,
you're getting credit for it from now on. I can tell you
oh,
that.
you're so sweet.
Yeah.
See, I need Dr. Cohen around me all the time.
I'm
Um,
here through Thursday.
yeah. See
Tip
you
your
next
wages.
Thursday.
Yeah, yeah.
What I find for me is because I'm so attached to a particular feeling of how I want to feel in the end over a particular type of change. Like I don't really have to worry about what my phone system is, right? And to implement these kind of technological changes that I maybe once did when I was in a big office environment. So for me and many small entrepreneurs that only have a few people, your goals are so personal and there's such a feeling attached to how you want to feel when you know that you've made it that when I get frustrated, when I hit obstacles, I've got to use all the resources around me to try and have conversations about this problem because I cannot come up with it in my head because I won't be able to grow. So I kind of pull from different sources, whether they're friends or different people in the industry. But then I come back to that feeling and I stop and when I pause, I come back and I say, okay, what's the real feeling I wanted to have at the end of this? Because if this goes down a different path for me to get there, because I am so agile, right? As a solopreneur, I can make a complete change of business format, right? Like I just started the podcasts, a year ago, and I can implement these changes very quickly. So if I realize that I want something, I have to go back to what is the actual feeling I want in the end versus necessarily, I want to build a big empire as a podcast. That is just a piece of the puzzle that's going to get me to where I want to go. So even if it's monetary, like I want to make X amount per year. But because I have a corporate background, I don't want to be tied to my time anymore. And so I have to take things like that into consideration that you might not do in a corporate environment. So it comes back to a feeling for me. It really comes back to what's the feeling that I want to accomplish and feel like in the end so that I can make sure that this next decision is that going to support that feeling or is that going to take me off course?
It's fascinating. First of all, I want to thank you for acknowledging your husband in that process. That and I have to acknowledge my wife, although she won't listen to the rest of the podcast. That we have a running joke that anytime that I experience any type of success, she'll look at me kind of coyly and say, "And you know why, right?" And
Oh, I love that.
it usually involves because I'm married to her. Um, but one of the things that what you said there is so interesting because it's so unique. I don't think I'd be hard pressed to think of a time that anyone said to me that when they're looking to create change or they have a goal, that use the benchmark of how it feels and how they want it to feel at the end. But if you can look at it and say, because if you think about it, if you're looking for an increased salary, that is rewarding at the beginning, but after a while, you learn to live with that increased salary. And
Yep.
usually, I make a point to say I'd like to think that a staff is well compensated, but most of the time, people respond for a sense of value and appreciation. I make a point to say thank you at the end of every workday to the
I
people in
love
my
it.
office because the paycheck is important. We need that. We need to be able to pay our bills.
Yes.
But the feeling that we have about what we do is often paramount. And the fact that you can allow, because you trust your feelings, allow that to guide you and say, is this going to create the kind of feeling I want at the end point? Is a really unique, and to me, I'm going to think a lot about that, a
Oh,
fascinating way to
good.
prioritize it. Yeah, I'm glad
That's
I
good
asked you
because
the
I think
question.
you probably somehow think about it more than you even notice because the way I've been in your office, because of the way that your office does run and how appreciated the people feel. I think you probably just didn't know that you were focused on that because you are in a more, traditional
Mhm.
office environment. You probably aren't thinking about it, but I think you personally probably do that more than most.
And that's and you're probably correct. And I'm going to internalize that a bit and process that. But you and I spoke previously about one of my favorites is Simon Sinek, and his start with why. And I
Yes.
think I mentioned to you previously that I had no idea what my why was because I never gave it any thought. But then it came to me in a second. My why was to have a positive impact on someone else's life. It could be a family member, a coworker, a patient, a friend. That's really what drove me and juiced me. But it was interesting to say I lived my life that way because then when I reflected back, I realized, yeah, you always have had that as a guiding principle, but I had never thought about it. And very much I do the same now with your thought about the end point being how I want to feel at that point is
Yes.
interesting and a very good chance that I have done that in the past. I'm going to reflect back now. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for asking it. Thank you so much. And I want to ask you one last question
Yeah.
before we head out here because this to me is so important. And so I'm interested in if something you've even thought about, and maybe you do it daily, I don't know. But so how do you celebrate change? And when do you celebrate change with your team? Do you do it like at the end of the project? Do you do it along the way? How do you even think upon the fact of celebration?
I got to tell you, I love the question. Um, and boy, there's so many ways to go with it. So let me start with this, that um, one is to potentially wear multiple hats as the change agent or the leader. So in one respect, I could be the compass. I'm charting the course. In another respect, I can see myself sort of as like an explorer. An explorer analyzes things as you go along and asks questions and gets input from other people. So you can learn from that. And the third, as I mentioned before, is I think it's important to be a cheerleader. So I'll give you an example. If let's say my goal was I want to get into shape, and I set whatever those things are. As I mentioned a couple of times, the goal is always keep your eye on what the end point you want to achieve, whether in your case, how that makes you feel, or maybe concrete specific goals you want to attain. But along the way, you need those stop and smell the proverbial roses, because it's
Yes.
those short victories that help feed the next short victory that leads to the ultimate goal. So, as an example, if with a working out situation, you may have the end point, but what about taking a pause and celebrating that, hey, I just lost the first 10 pounds, or I just hit my benchmark of sit-ups or pull-ups, or I worked up to walking a mile. Each of
The
those,
jeans fit.
the jean, yeah, now I can wear that. Yes, belt's a little bit tighter. Yeah, all of those things. So even though you're not at the end point, it's so helpful to be able to take that pause and be able to celebrate those incremental victories to act as fuel for further along. If you set it for what the end point is, sometimes you run out of steam because it may still be
True.
remote. It may still be a further way. So back to the relationship now with working with a team is to recognize to have that long-term goal and keep our eye on the prize, but to see those short-term goals and those short-term celebrations. So what might it encompass? It could be hosting a lunch for the team of the staff. It could be team building activities. And nothing goes further than the congratulations for a job well done, not when we're finished and we're packing everything up, but every step along the way. Because the bottom line of it is when the topic of change can be frustrating and for many people is really frightening, but it could also be rewarding and enriching. And I'm one who welcomes change. I embrace it. I look for opportunities to grow. And I made a commitment in my practice all along that I was always going to look for ways to deliver care better for my patients and to have a better environment for my coworkers and for all of us together on a daily basis. And I've never wavered in that. I want to keep doing that until the day I retire, which is no time soon, by the way. I get that question a lot.
Yay.
I have no plan to retire because I truly love what I do, perhaps more than ever. It's been 40 years and counting, and so far so good. But
Wow.
I think what it reminds me of, when you look at that perseverance and that it's got to be being fueled all the way along, because like the old Elton John song, I'm still standing.
I love it. Well, and along that line is sometimes to get to the big goal, you have to have mini goals. And even if one of those mini goals you decide that that really wasn't important, if you didn't celebrate some of the other goals, you might keep changing course to get to the big goal and you've never once celebrated. And like you said, you lose steam, right? You need snacks along the way.
When you think about a trip, if it's an exciting trip, certainly the trip itself is the penultimate thing. But isn't the planning fun? The anticipation, the checking the calendar, and you're another month closer to the big vacation. That's all part of the joy. It doesn't only have to
True.
start when you pack your bags. Well, it used to be fun from the time I used to say that my vacation starts when I say goodbye to my last patient, because I don't feel like I work for a living, so I don't need 2 or 3 days to unwind. But even the packing, going to the airport, none of that bothered me. Now, unfortunately, travel's not as pleasant as it used to be. That the true pleasure comes from when I reach the destination. But all the lead up to it is also fun and exciting and anticipatory, and you can fantasize about what it'll be like and plan things you want to do. And we shouldn't lose sight of that because it's not just the
I
week's
love that.
vacation, it's everything that leads up to it. And when it comes to fostering change, the whole process can be rewarding and fun and enriching. And to the term you use multiple times, joyful.
I love that. I love that. What a great wrap up. I love
Hmm.
that. I can't say that I've ever thought of about my vacations that way, but now it makes sense why I love every step along the way. And it's probably because I think of that as part of my vacation. And I've
Mhm.
never really thought about it. So thank you for that. I just, huh.
So I'm going to think
I'm gonna
about
talk
the
about that to my husband because he doesn't enjoy the shuffle, and I love the shuffle.
well, you'll think about the vacation. I'm going to think about the end point being an emotion rather than a concrete goal. So we both
I
have
love it.
homework to do.
We do. We both have homework, and I
Mhm.
absolutely love it. I just want to thank you so much for coming back. And this, I have to say, this is probably my favorite of the three. I think I've said
Really?
that. Oh, this was great. This was great. This was great. But this kind of brought everything together, and it just took it to a different level for me, anyways. And I just appreciate all your insight, all your years of expertise, all your wisdom. I just love when you're on here. I just absolutely love it. And I want to
Well,
thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to be here.
well, thank you. I greatly appreciate that, and I hope you'll ask me back again because I love spending this time with you and sharing these ideas.
Oh, I see that in the stars. And I want to thank everybody else here for joining me and Dr. Cohen. Oh, by the way, before I end, if somebody would like to reach you, I want to make sure that they know how to get a hold of you. What would be the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, thank you. I mean, the easiest way, my office is on Scottsdale Road, just north of Shea. The easiest way is you can call. My number is 480-513-3937. 513 and 3937 is EYES. But they can call my office. But if there are people that just want to talk, that they can call, and I'll be happy to leave me a message, be happy to call them back, or maybe give my email address and discuss it because it's so engaging when you have the opportunity with people who are motivated and want to share or want to learn more. So I'm happy to do that if the opportunity comes up.
Wonderful. We'll put your website and your email in the
Oh,
notes so that
that'd
people
be
can
great.
also look you up because it is Dr. Cohen's not to be missed. And if you do live here in Scottsdale, Arizona, you've got to see him. He's just pleasure, as you can hear and
Um,
see.
Thank
So
you, Christina.
again, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone again for joining me in this episode. If this spoke to you in any way whatsoever, just remember to hit that button on your podcast. Just follow us. And honestly, if you had an aha moment at all, screenshot this episode. Tell me what it was. Give me your biggest takeaway. I want to hear it. Tell me what I can help you with even more. I would love that. And if you'd like any more information on how you can incorporate these changes into your Ultimate 180, just go to ultimate180.com and join my VIP list. I've got a lot of things coming, workshops, all sorts of things. So make sure you're part of the conversation. And you can always catch all my episodes there on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your shows.